Welcome to the Wellness Project with Des. I'm your host, Des, a mental health therapist and holistic wellness coach. On this podcast, I bring you conversations with experts in mental health and wellness, along with powerful firsthand stories from those who have navigated their own mental health journeys. Together, we explore practical tips, tools, and strategies to support your well-being, offering hope, encouragement, and inspiration along the way. I'm so grateful that you're here. If you enjoy the show, I'd love for you to take a moment to leave a review on iTunes and rate the podcast 5 stars on Spotify. Your support helps the Wellness Project with Des to grow, bringing even more incredible guests and valuable insights to our community. And make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss a thing. Enjoying the podcast? Stay tuned until the end to find out how you can support the show and ways we can work together. Now let's dive in. Hello there, I'm your host Des, and this is episode number 191. It's hard to believe that we are quickly approaching 200 episodes. I will have on episode 200, it's just going to be me. It's going to be a solo episode, just kind of reflecting on the podcast, how far it's come, some of my favorite topics and episodes. Can't believe we are almost at 200 episodes. That is wild. For today's episode, I have a great interview for you. I am speaking with Barb Higgins. Now, Barb went through numerous traumatic experiences in her life. She had a very hard go of it, but she talks about something that kept her grounded and helped her healing throughout her life, and that was movement. Physical activity, specifically for Barb, running, because she was on track throughout school. And then in her adult life, she discovered CrossFit. So we're mostly going to be talking about running and CrossFit in this episode, but Barb talks about this, and it's something that we've talked about in numerous episodes before, that movement is so good for us. Mentally, emotionally, physically, so grounding and really helps with healing, and movement really promotes releasing trauma from the body, healing trauma. And Barb is a testament to this. She has experienced so many tragedies in her life, been through so many traumatic experiences, and running and CrossFit have helped to ground her. And they also helped to give her that community that also promotes healing. So again, we are talking about mostly running and CrossFit in this episode, but any movement applies. Find what works best for you. For me specifically, I used to do HIIT workouts, which I really, really liked. I haven't done those in a long time, and I feel like if I did one today, I would absolutely just faint to the floor. But I do really enjoy hiking, which obviously is not something that I am able to do every day, unfortunately. But I do also really like Pilates. I also walk on my treadmill when I can as well. My goal is always to get my 10,000 steps. It's not always possible, but I do try. So again, just any form of movement, whatever you are able to do, whether that's yoga, running, HIIT workouts, tai chi, stretching, whatever the case may be, movement is healing. I really hope that you enjoy this episode and that it inspires you to get some regular physical movement into your days. I always talk about the mind-body connection, so important. Help me welcome on Barb. All right, everyone, I am here with Barb Higgins. Barb, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so looking forward to this conversation. So to get us started, I would love if you could share who you are, share your mental health journey with us, how you got to where you are today.
I will. So I'm Barb Higgins, and I'm your, in many ways, classic 61-year-old New Hampshire native female-bodied human doing the best she can in her day-to-day life. And a lot of my life is very, very quote-unquote normal or mundane. But I'm often commented on by others that I've gone through more in my life than most people would go through in 100 lifetimes. And that's probably true. I think life is just that kind of journey for some people. So in the smooth road of life, mine's a bumpy roller coaster. I've had lots of ups and lots of downs. I went to college to be an educator, and that's why I spent 30 years teaching in public school. And I still do some teaching and a lot of coaching. And it took me a long time as a human to like my body. And so that's sort of where using movement and exercise and everything to deal with trauma, that's sort of where my connection is. Hating my body, hating myself, hating what was happening to me, and connecting it all to my own self-worth, and then realizing me and my body are two separate things. And so we could have a relationship with one another. And maybe that sounds hokey, I'm not sure. But so anyway, I can just jump right in and get started if that's what you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be
Yeah.
great.
All right, great. So, as a child, and so I was born in 1963, so the very end of the baby boomer generation. So I had your standard family, mom, dad, an older brother, me, and then little baby brother and sister. And it was your classic get up, go to school, come home, mom is there, play outside. And everything was sort of going along swimmingly until I started to begin to be sexually abused by my father. So when I was 7 years old and this all started, no one talked about any of this. I had no idea what was going on. I knew it wasn't right. I knew that you weren't supposed to touch people where I was being touched or be naked in front of people, all that kind of, sort of traditional upbringing. And so as a child, it was incredibly puzzling. And it took me a couple of years to really realize that what was happening to me was not my fault and not okay. But like all children do in any abusive situation, we own it. What did I do wrong? I'll clean my room. I'll babysit my brother and sister. I'll eat all my green beans. Like all of the things in my head that I thought if I did better, the abuse would stop. And it didn't stop until I finally got the courage to tell. My parents divorced. It was my father who was abusing me. And I was in middle school around that time. And so then began my journey of really, really self-hatred. A little bit of eating disorder. I got really into drinking. And when I was in middle school and high school, the drinking age was 18. So anyone with older siblings, the alcohol was plentiful. So it was an easy escape for me. But I was severely asthmatic. I just had a lot working against me physically. And a lot of my asthma, I think, was related to the abuse. And so I hated myself. I hated that I wasn't coordinated. I hated how skinny I was. I hated that I felt disgusting. And I hated that I had been made aware of feelings of a sexual nature that kids shouldn't be aware of. So all of it was just incredibly confusing and terrifying. I'm lucky in the sense that I was never physically hurt, it was never painful what was done to me, and I was immediately believed and everything was sort of rectified. However, about 2 years after I told, my mother remarried my father. She felt that he had been rehabilitated and everything else. So that was also incredibly troubling and probably as traumatic, if not more, than the abuse itself. I just felt I didn't understand how, quite honestly, I still don't understand how you could pull somebody like that back into your life. But she did, and he was now a part of the household again. I went out for track, and as an asthmatic, completely not, my parents were worried about me. Don't do that. You're going to wheeze all the time. You'll fail. I had tried all these different sports, and running for some reason clicked. And it became the first time that I would look in the mirror and be like, oh my God, I'm so lucky I have this body. So I'm sure if you've talked to traumatized people, you know that when you're being abused or assaulted or whatever, you can dissociate, step out of your body. It's an amazing skill to have as a distance runner. And in my lifetime as an elite competitive distance runner in the 80s, almost every really high level female distance runner I met had suffered some sort of abuse as a child. It was actually quite alarming. And there are a number of books about it. People have written memoirs and such. So my first use of movement to sort of ease myself was running. Now, I wasn't compulsive about it. I loved it. I loved how it made me feel. I loved that I could run and not wheeze. I liked all of it. And surprisingly, I was really good at it, super good at it. I received a full scholarship to college. And that was the first year that the NCAA recognized women. So my body didn't betray me. My body didn't fail me. And I think running at that level of my life saved me. And running was a part of my life for the next, 25 years. During my 20s and 30s, I was your classic adult survivor of abuse. I drank a lot. I went to AA. I stopped going to AA. I still competed in running, but I never got as good as I could. When I look back on it now, like I read The Body Keeps the Score and books like that on trauma, and I'm just a poster child for it. And I tried other things. I tried theater. I tried music. I took violin. Like I just did a lot of different things, all that are, recommended sort of treatments for trauma. I finally, in my mid 30s or so, I met my current husband and actually was able to fall in love in a reasonable way that felt normal and get married and have a couple of children. My next major trauma was a job loss connected to a testimony I gave. It was sort of like a whistleblower thing. I was a 20-year teacher at the high school I went to. I was enjoying what felt like a normal, regular life, which again, trauma survivors often don't understand how to live a normal life. So I ended up losing my job. It was like a forced resignation. I lost my teaching position and I lost my coaching. I coached the cross country and track teams. So suddenly I didn't have running anymore because everyone in the running community was connected to everyone else. And I had this horrible, traumatizing event and I was ashamed and I felt, judged and really just isolated. A lot of my friends stopped talking to me. I didn't really know what to do. I was in a bit of a panic. So I would go run. I get in my car and drive to a different town and go for a run, or I drive to Boston and run an indoor track. Like I found ways to run, but it wasn't doing for me what it had done before. At about that time, a young lady who I used to coach, I was working at a gymnastics gym and I was just piecing together part-time jobs, still working with kids. And she came along and said, "Hey, I just discovered this new sport. You might like it." And she explained CrossFit to me. And I sort of blew it off. Like I just didn't have it in my head to, commit to something new. But a friend of mine joined. And after about 2 months, I saw the change in her physique and the change in her mindset. And she was just sort of like a completely different person. Watching her transform and watching her talk about how much she loved the people she was meeting and all of that, I finally decided to go. And actually, today is my 13-year anniversary of starting CrossFit, 2011. Yeah, I know. It's
Amazing.
crazy. Yeah. So I joined a CrossFit gym and it was the same way I felt about running. It was this instantaneous connection and love for the sport. Some of it was, so I was 46 at the time, 47 maybe. I loved that I was good at it. I loved that my natural endurance and athleticism made me successful. There weren't a lot of women at the gym at the time. It was mostly these young, muscular men, which as a late woman in her late 40s wasn't a bad environment to be in. It was just fun and sort of non-threatening. I was like everyone's mother. And I got good at it right away. And I had an amazing physical transformation and an amazing new group of friends. And these people only knew the current version of me. It wasn't a lot of people that knew me before I lost my job. They weren't connected to the running community. It was just a whole new, fresh batch of people. But the other thing I noticed with the CrossFit was that I don't know how much you know about CrossFit. I think when people hear it, they think of big muscly people in these crazy competitions and doing unsafe things. I had an ER doctor tell me she thought I was foolish for doing CrossFit at my age. The connection for me was more than just physical. CrossFit is a very service-oriented community. A lot of military belong to CrossFit. There are fundraisers and gym initiatives all the time centered around mental health, centered around men's mental health, which I think is often overlooked. I just found this incredible way of living, which was all sorts of support groups combined. Like AA is all about gratitude, and you can't belong to a CrossFit gym and not live in an attitude of gratitude, because the mindset in the gym is to honor your body and, test yourself and challenge yourself, but don't go against your instincts. It's just sort of I don't know how to explain it, but it saved me regardless. And after a few months of CrossFit, I was better mentally. I applied and got some other jobs. My life sort of turned around again. Looking back now, I realized that more than saving me from a job loss, CrossFit prepared me for what was to come, which was the death of my 13-year-old daughter, Molly. So that was like a brick in the face. There's no other way to describe losing a child. It's utterly hobbling. In the 2 years after her death, so we're in year 9 now. She died in 2016, in May. For the 2 years following her death, I was a mess. I was drinking all the time. I was on every prescription medicine you can imagine to try to keep myself sane. I got involved with a friend of mine who had a massive coke connection. So here I am, a woman in my early 50s, and I'm doing cocaine every day, which is hard to admit, but I feel like I need to be honest about that. There are a lot of other people that suffer just like that. And if I hide it, not really being authentic. But I was a disastrous mess. And through all of that, the 2 coaches at my CrossFit gym never once sort of gave up on my coming to the gym. If I didn't show up for a few days, one of them would come up and get me. My daughter, Gracie, who was 15 at the time of Molly's death, was given a free membership for life at the gym because the coaches understood that in the wake of trauma and tragedy, sometimes having a new activity that's not connected to what you lost or what you thought you would be or what might have been is the best methodology for healing. And moving your body and being physical is also incredibly helpful. And my little timid Gracie became a pretty solid CrossFit athlete. She fell in love with it as well. She got a nickname, the Hammer. And I was called the machine, which was just kind of funny. But through all those, 2 years of really just being wasted and high as a kite or drunk every day, I still managed to go to the gym every day. And sometimes all I could do was sit there and watch. I was really, 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 truly just broken. But what wasn't lost on me was that on my better days, when I woke up and was maybe hungover or tired, but able to work out, it always made me feel better. And it always connected me to the reality that even though my body and my mind are two different things, I live in this body and it's the only one I have. And I have to be able to maintain it and manage it to be a healthy human. CrossFit brought that for me. It's all sorts of movements. There's cardio, there's rowing machines and stationary bikes, there's heavy lifting, there's dumbbells and kettlebells, there's box jumps, pull-ups, all of it. Everything you can imagine in the exercise realm exists in CrossFit, and you do little bits of it all the time, every day. It's not, you don't do the same thing every day. Before, like, internet was so prevalent, you didn't know what the workout was until you showed up in the gym. In some ways, I think that was better because you just showed up not knowing what was going to happen. Now you can go online and look at the website and see what the workout is. But again, you all show up, you stand with a group of people, you have a coach leading the class, you have camaraderie. You don't start putting your stuff away until the last person's finished. You can have every level of athlete working out together, all accomplishing the same thing. And I think that was the running connection for me. One thing I loved about running was it didn't really matter how good you were all doing the same thing. And so at the end of the practice, at the end of the day, you could all commiserate with what was good and what wasn't. Everyone has individual strengths and weaknesses, and the CrossFit gym is the same way. As I got more into the CrossFit and maintaining it after Molly's death, I had this other strange thing happen to me, which I thought was part of the trauma, is I started having this really bizarre dream that I should have a child. So here I am in my mid-50s. I've just lost my daughter, Molly. She was 13. Gracie's 15. That's sort of my reality, not thinking I'm ever going to have a child again in this crazy, crazy time. So I took the dream to heart, and I felt like I must be having the dream for a reason. There must be some sort of universal reason why this dream is coming to me again and again. So it gave me the motivation. So, okay, I'll try to have a baby. And I found a physician that deals with older women and IVF and having babies. And so I had all this physical work done. So when I was going for all these tests, I had to have a colonoscopy and a mammogram and make sure the body could handle a pregnancy and all of it. It really was incentive to clean up my act. So I went off all my medications. I stopped the cocaine. I cut way back on the drinking and really started to just center myself. And CrossFit was a huge piece of that. I read every article I could on using CrossFit to prepare for a healthy pregnancy. I read about doing CrossFit while you're pregnant. By this time now, I've been involved in CrossFit long enough to know tons of CrossFit athletes and have seen lots of women work out through their pregnancies and all that. So in the process of deciding to really try to go for it and have a baby, I discovered I had brain tumors in my head, one really big one and two small ones. So here we go. I lose my job. I find CrossFit. I feel better. I lose my child. My world falls apart. My poor daughter just wants to graduate high school and make believe she's normal. Kenny, my husband, needed a kidney transplant at the time. And so he was so sick. So poor Gracie has this, dad that needs a kidney transplant, mother that now has brain tumors, dead sister. That whole year, so sort of 2018 into 2019, all Gracie and I could do to maintain any sort of sanity was go to CrossFit 3 or 4 times a week. She danced, and dancing was huge for her. So at this time, I also started coaching because I just felt like, physically speaking, I was, more physically fit than most women my age, but I was a shadow of my former self. But I couldn't, any long period of time away from the gym, and I really would start to fall back into really unhealthy thought patterns, if that makes sense. And so I got certified to be a CrossFit coach, and I started picking up some shifts like that. So I had the brain tumors removed. Fortunately, they were benign, but that was a long, arduous process. I will say my neurologist, the man that took out the tumors, couldn't believe I was my age. He said, the numbers in all these tests and the number on your license here doesn't match at all. Part of that obviously is genetics, but what is it you do? And so I explained that I had been, a lifelong elite distance runner, but now that I was a CrossFit athlete, that I went to a CrossFit gym every day. He asked a million questions, which I found uplifting because most times I was just immediately judged, like, oh, you're doing that crazy CrossFit thing. So when I really explained to him sort of what we did, and I brought my training logs in for him to look at, so he looked all through it, and he pointed out that so much of CrossFit is nervous system training. How do you stimulate your nervous system? Short, quick bursts. 80% effort for 20 minutes, heavy lifting, no lifting and cardio, like this big combination, all these different ways, so much balance and proprioception, which for me, someone that gets lost in my crazy thoughts, all that focus in the gym is a wonderful silencer for me, for the voices in my head that, can bring me to bad places. So I maintained that. So I ended up having the brain tumors removed. Everything was fine. Kenny got a kidney transplant. That was an amazing sort of story. I had a baby. It worked. I went through the IVF process, and I worked out every single day of that pregnancy. There wasn't one day that I didn't go. Part of it was my body. I want to maintain as much youthfulness as I can, keep my blood pressure down, mobility up, all of those things. But most of it was just feeling okay in my body. And I feel best inside myself when I'm using my body in a positive way, when I'm physically fit. We set up a porch today, and I moved a recliner by myself. I rearranged my whole room to take a carpet out, and I don't need any help with these things. 61 years old, and I could empty my house of furniture by myself if I had to. So part of it during the pregnancy was that, just maintaining my ability to be self-sufficient. Had a super easy delivery. And I've had a relatively good recovery, age is what it is. And as I get older, I definitely feel physical differences. But for me, for somebody that hated my body because it was abused, hated my body because it was asthmatic, hated my body because it was skinny, and then was able to just transfer that sort of self-judgment into poor decision-making and job loss and dead children and all of the ways that we can hate ourselves. Really, the one constant for me has always been movement, getting out of breath, getting out of myself, getting to a level of physical discomfort that I have to focus on it to maintain it, to convince myself I can keep going, whether it's running in a race or picking up a heavy weight, whatever it is. That the connection for me is universal. And that doesn't mean I don't take days off. Again, I'm not super fanatic about it in my mind. I think compared to some people, they would probably think I was a bit of a fanatic. But I have a firm belief that movement and mind-body connection in a physical way, whether it's climbing a mountain or ice skating or swimming or I don't know, I don't think it's movement specific. I just think you find a way that you like to move your body and it can only be helpful. Like I can't do yoga. No, thank you. I cannot sit still with a bunch of people and get into my head. I hate yoga. Sorry, all my yoga people, but that's hard on me. If I need to meditate, I get on the rowing machine because I don't have to think about it. I can just row, or I go for a run, although I can sometimes not look both ways if I'm lost in my thoughts. But if I need to reflect and meditate, sitting still doesn't do it for me. And from running was the initial connection. Running was the way that I first loved my body and what I could make it do, how it responded, and was the first time that I felt okay about myself in a physical way. And I've just found other ways to maintain that for the rest of my life so far.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I mean, it's such a powerful one. And I think it's such a testament to the mind body connection. But not only that, not only the power of movement, but it sounds like throughout this process, you had community, which I think is also another part that's so important for our healing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a wonderful little Winnie the Pooh thing about, I think Eeyore is sad. And so it's either Piglet or Pooh just sits next to him on the log. And he's like, what are you doing? And nothing, I'm just sitting with you, and sometimes, especially in the wake of Molly's death, I would go to the gym and just tears pouring down. In the beginning, people didn't know what to do. And so I just said to them, you don't need to do anything. Just let me stay here and cry, and lift my weights with tears. And it was just this unbelievable level of acceptance. Like, we'll just work out with you while you're sad. And I think for me, that was a huge piece of it.
I think that is a huge piece. And I think that that's amazing that you had that community and that place to go where people were accepting and did just sit in that grief with you. And I'm wondering too, because we know that movement is so helpful in processing our emotions, our grief, our traumas, such a powerful way to release that trauma from our bodies. I think that the way our society is set up now, I mean, a majority of us live in this sedentary lifestyle. Do you believe that this sedentary lifestyle is impacting our ability to process our emotions effectively?
Absolutely. Oh my God. I would like 2000% say that our current lifestyle inhibits a number of things. If you look at more primitive human behavior, children didn't sit at tables all day with boxes of crayons and scissors and follow directions from somebody at the front of a room. Children went out into the woods and the fields with their parents and ran around and played or helped while their parents worked. in a pure sense, we aren't designed to be sedentary. Now, I was a special ed teacher for 15 years, and the last 3 or 4 years of my teaching special ed was when autism first really came to the forefront. And I had really good success with children on the spectrum. And one of the main reasons was I didn't make them stay still. Like I would say, okay, it's math class, and these are some of the things we have to do. Whiteboards were brand new then. Instead of chalkboards, whiteboards it was like the 90s. So, and I said, if you need to stand and work, grab a whiteboard, do one example at a time, show me your work, and I'll check it off on your paper that you've done it. So the principal would come in and be like, what is going on here? And the kids would be like, we're doing math. And they're everywhere. But at the end of 45 minutes, all of those kids had done their 15 math problems, and they'd been able to, because they could move around. I'm sure, I don't know if you've heard of, it's a term called vestibular stimulation, but basically what it is it's like a kid that needs to chew gum or squeeze a stress ball or fiddle with something so that they can pay attention, like doodle. Like I used to color on my desk, and it was just something to do so I could pay attention. And when I really first started to notice how much kids need to move, it dawned on me that when I asked them questions when they were busy moving around, they could give me the answer almost immediately. If they were sitting around a table and I asked them a question, they had 50 little fidgety things they had to do before they could even begin to formulate the answer. And these were kids that had learning issues, ADHD, learning disabilities, autism. But sometimes I think we're giving those kids because they show us really clearly behaviors that we can't see in ourselves. And that's where I really sort of became way more like dedicated to keeping movement in education for kids, because we're not supposed to sit still. And I think, and not to be super gender specific about it, but I think little boys are naturally more active and naturally less able to sit still than girls. I just think it's a physiological hormonal reality. My daughters, Gracie and Molly, when they were little, I could give them things and they could busy themselves. And I'm raising Jack now. He's a little boy. And I can give him a million toys, and he's good for a little bit. And then he's got to throw them around, or he's got to take all the cushions off the couch and jump. He just has to do this movement. He's not trying to be contrary. He is who he is. So I send him to an outdoor preschool. It's like a nature school. They're outside all day. They take naps on little hammocks. In the wintertime, they just bundle up and wrap up, and they have like a little campfire, and they have like a tent sort of thing, but they're outside. They're outside all day. He just knows so many things because he doesn't realize he's learning. He's taking it all in while he plays. So yeah, I think a sedentary lifestyle is completely contrary to a lot of what keeps people healthy. It doesn't mean everyone has to be outside all day, but I do believe it means that we shouldn't be spending 40 hours a week inside, doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a lot of people, myself included, some days my only time outside is walking to my car to drive to work, and then walking into the building, walking
Yeah.
to my car to go home, walking
Yeah.
into my apartment. And that's my only time outside some days.
Yeah. And and then I look at, so I have a good friend, and she's being nomadic with her family. She's raising her family as a traveler. And right now they're in New Zealand, and she has 3 kids, and she's pregnant with her fourth. And the big thing that got she and her husband to decide to sell everything they owned and become sort of a traveling nomadic family is that they realized they were spending all their time doing something they weren't enjoying to pay for childcare for their kids and a home to live in. And when they really thought about it, what are we doing? We're being miserable to make money to pay for things that make us miserable. He still works quite a bit remotely and all, but they live a lifestyle that is outside and moving around and traveling and learning all the time. And it came from not liking sitting still, needing to physically explore and move. And they have all boys. So yeah, she might like sitting still now.
Well,
Yeah.
that's amazing. That sounds
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
So, for some people who want to begin to recognize the emotions within their body, are there any things that you recommend, any tools, any strategies that somebody can begin this process?
I'm someone that is a chronic self-distractor. The last thing I like to do is self-reflect or ponder. I have a hard time. I love to write, but I'm not a good journaler. I'm not consistent with it. The name of my podcast is called 1,000 Tiny Steps. And I think biggest piece of advice I give to anybody, whether it's how do I grieve my dead child? How do I, incorporate a new habit? How do I stop drinking? How do I, whatever it is that they might be wanting to do or a goal they want to have. And for me, the biggest thing is just to take the first step, even if you don't know what the first step is. Movement's like food. It's such a personal thing. So much of movement comes from your cultural background, how you were raised, I grew up in a family. My mother took us to the beach or the mountains all the time. So it was natural for me. My podcast editor is one of the most sedentary people in the history of sedentary people. He just doesn't like to move. He likes to be still. He likes to be still outside. Movement is not something that naturally comes to him. He's having sort of a growth. He's in his mid-20s. He's like, I think maybe I'll take like a dance class, just like once a week. And I'm like, oh, like tap? And he's like, no, more like lyrical maybe, or, something a little bit slower. Like it was really, that came to mind. And so he asked me similar questions. What do you think? And I'm like, I think you need to give it a shot. And if you hate it after 20 minutes, then it's not for you. And you try the next thing. So yeah, I sometimes the best advice is no advice, because what's going to work for me isn't going to work for someone else. I think what I would say is that if you're questioning what might make you feel better, make a list of things to do and see which ones make you feel better. And I know that sounds really vague, but we all have good memories. Like we all have wonderful childhood memories. Like I loved swimming in the pool in the summertime. I loved playing hopscotch. I loved riding my bike. So if I were a non-active person, those are the things I might try first, because I have happy connections to them from when I was a child.
No, I love that. And I love coming at it from this frame of mind that it's an experiment. And
Right.
again, like what works for me may not work for you. Coming at it in that way, that let's experiment, let's try some things. I think that's great
Exactly.
advice.
Yep. Yep. And some of the most amazing things were discovered because what they were looking for didn't happen. The scientific mistakes. And here now we have penicillin, or we have pasteurization, or we have electricity, when they were looking for something completely different. And so sometimes making the mistake is what leads you to what will work.
No, absolutely. And just for example, I've been trying to walk on my treadmill a lot. I was more successful in the summer because I work in a school, so I had the summer off. And now I'm working full time during the day, and then I see my clients in the evening. So I don't have a ton of time for that movement, right? So I was trying to be more intentional about it. And my job actually gives a reimbursement for a gym or something. So I was like, let me take advantage of this. And it's not the full, it's like up to a certain amount. It's not the full
Yeah.
amount,
Yeah.
but I'm like, let me try to take advantage of this. So I signed up for, one of my goals is to be more flexible. So I signed up for a few sessions at Stretch Zone or Stretch Lab, whatever it
Yeah.
is. So
Yeah.
I
Yep.
so I
Yep.
go, yeah, so I go like once a week, once every other week. And then I saw that right across the street is a Pilates studio. And Pilates is something that I like to do at home. And I was interested in maybe going in person. So I'm like, okay, I tried this stretch, which I really like, but now I'm like, oh, maybe in the new year, maybe I could try Pilates studio, right? So trying something has possibly led me to something
So
else.
your first step was something very manageable for you. I'll just go to the stretch lab and help become more flexible. And so you didn't like start out by buying a full-time membership, $200 a month at some big giant Globo gym, one little thing.
Exactly. I was just like, let me just buy like 4 or 5 sessions and see how
Yeah.
it goes and start
Yeah.
there. So,
Perfect.
exactly. Start where you're at, just experiment, try one little thing.
Yeah.
Well, I love that. Barb, this has been amazing. Such a great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your story and being
Oh gosh,
vulnerable
anytime.
and
Yeah.
really being authentic. I think that's so valuable. Do
Yeah.
you have any last words of wisdom or advice for our listeners?
Yeah, I think I would say there's no wrong answer to any part of a journey, that every question you ask and every answer you ignore or follow is part of it. I just think that when it comes to living in your body and having a relationship with your body that isn't, critical and hateful, the best thing you can do, I think, is to just sort of be self-accepting. I know for me, the first thing I do is judge everything I haven't done. And when it comes to movement and wellness and adding, whether it's fitness or just movement or activity into your life, anything you do is better than what you weren't doing. Even if what you do fails or doesn't feel successful or doesn't work and you have to try something else, you never rack up a list of failures in the journey to finding how to make your body work for you. Everything you do, regardless of how it turns out, is a good step to finding sort of that inner peace with your body.
Thank you so much, Barb. I would love if you can share where everyone can find you.
So my podcast is called A Thousand Tiny Steps. That's also the name of my website. I have a blog there, so I do like a weekly blog and a weekly email. And then I have a foundation in honor of my daughter. It's called the Molly B Foundation, and that is also on a website, and you can get to it. Each website will get you to the other website. And my foundation, so Molly, my daughter Molly's love was dance and theater, and she played violin, so performing arts. So we raise as much money as we can, and then we give it all away. Children sort of statewide. I'd love to be a nationwide foundation someday, to get kids into theater and the arts, especially kids that have come from a history of trauma, because dance and theater and all that goes into creating a story with your body like that is super, super helpful, along with things like CrossFit. But so I have that. And then on social media, it's just Barb. So Barb_444 is my Instagram. And then I have a public profile on Facebook, Barb Higgins. So I'm easy to find.
All right, perfect. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. I'm going to link all of those in the show notes. Barb, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, and thank you for doing this. One thing I love about being a podcaster is how many amazing people like you I've met who have an idea and they bring it to fruition and hear people's stories. I've learned so much from people I will never meet by listening to podcasts like this. So I'm glad you're doing this. It's a good thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love having guests. I always learn so much in every conversation. So
Same.
valuable. And thank you so much for the work that you do.
Yay, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful. For detailed show notes, go to accordingtodez.com / and then whatever episode number this is. So again, that's accordingtodez.com / episode number. If you'd like to work together, you can schedule a free coaching consult call, or you can join my Mindful Monday support group. Links are in the show notes. You'll also find a curated list of books written by or recommended by my amazing podcast guests on my Amazon storefront, so be sure to check that out. If you loved this episode, share it and tag me on social media. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at The Wellness Project with Des. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment. For more wellness resources, you can visit my website, accordingtodez.com. There you'll find wellness blogs, expert interviews, and a wide variety of digital products like ebooks, audio meditations, and downloadable journals to support your mental health and personal growth. If you gain value from this podcast, consider supporting the show by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com / The Wellness Project with Des. Your support helps the podcast to grow and allows me to continue bringing you incredible guests and valuable content. While you're at it, join my email list to stay in the loop on everything I have available for you. As a thank you, you'll receive a free downloadable coloring book with positive affirmations. I'd also love for you to join my Facebook community where we dive deeper into each episode with discussions, journal prompts, reflections, and mental health and wellness content. It's a supportive space, and I'm there daily. Come say hi. The link is in the show notes. And don't forget to check out my Redbubble shop. The Wellness Project by Des, my collection of mental health and wellness products, is designed to uplift and inspire. From fun and uplifting apparel to motivational notebooks and bags. You can browse the collection at my Redbubble shop, and be sure to favorite my store because I'm always adding new designs. And if you have a custom idea, feel free to message me. I'd love to create something special for you. Thank you so much for being here. I'll be back soon with another episode, and until then, I hope you have a calm and peaceful week.